Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video on the Retro Entertainment Archive. I'm glad you can make it, and I think we'll have some fun here today in this particular video because I want to talk about two films, one in 1955 and one in 1957, concerning a popular British science fiction character named Professor Bernard Quatermass. I'm sure that people in Britain are going to be very familiar with that term, with that name, I should say. And this character, Professor Quatermass, he originally started on BBC television in a series of TV serials, but then HammerFilm Productions wanted to produce a series of science fiction films that had horror elements in it as well. So what they did was they took the Quatermass character and produced two films, the Quatermass Experiment and Quatermass II. And that's what those two films I'm going to be talking about today. So I think this is going to be a fun installment, and please join me at the desk as we talk about the Quatermass Experiment and Quatermass II. All right, so we'll get this video underway, and I think we're going to have some fun exploring the Quatermass character, and especially the two films that HammerFilms Productions had created. And again, these two films I'm going to be featuring, they combined elements not only of science fiction but also of horror, and I think that the combination certainly does both films very well, and I think you'll enjoy this one, and I'm sure that you'll be interested in checking them out eventually. Now, I guess first of all, got my notes as usual. So, now to talk a little bit about Professor Quatermass. Now, Bernard Quatermass is a fictional scientist originally created by writer Nigel Kneale for BBC television. An intelligent and highly moral British scientist, Quatermass is a pioneer of the British space program, heading the British Experimental Rocket Group. He continually finds himself confronting sinister alien forces that threaten to destroy humanity. Well, sounds good already. The Quatermass Experiment was a British science fiction serial broadcast by BBC television during the summer of 1953. Originally comprising 6 half-hour episodes, it was the first science fiction production to be written especially for a British adult television audience. The Quatermass Experiment achieved favorable viewing figures in 1953, opening with an estimated audience of 3.4 million for the first episode, increasing to 5 million for the sixth and final episode, and averaging 3.9 million for the entire serial. Now that's pretty impressive for the time. And it shows, however, that there was an interest for this type of programming, especially for this type of character as well. The Quatermass Experiment, and specifically Professor Quatermass, inspired much of the television science fiction that succeeded it, particularly in the United Kingdom, where it influenced successful series such as Doctor Who and Sapphire and Steel. It also influenced successful Hollywood films such as 2001: A Space Odyssey and the first Alien film. Now, just to go over the first film, the Quatermass Experiment. Now, this film was known in the United States as The Creeping Unknown, and it is a 1955 British science fiction horror film from HammerFilms Productions. It was based on the 1953 BBC television serial. The film was produced by Anthony Hines, and it was directed by Val Guest. And it stars American actor Brian Donlevy as Bernard Quatermass, and Richard Wordsworth as the tormented astronaut Carroon. Jack Warner also stars, as well as David King Wood and Margia Dean, appearing in all of those people were appearing in co-starring roles in the film. Now, just to give a synopsis of the film itself, it concerns 3 astronauts who have been launched into space aboard a single stage-to-orbit rocket designed by Professor Quatermass. It crash lands with only one of its original crew, Victor Carroon, still aboard. He begins mutating into an alien organism which, if it spawns, will engulf the Earth and destroy humanity. After Carroon escapes from custody, Quatermass and Inspector Lomax of Scotland Yard have just hours to track the potentially dangerous entity down and prevent a catastrophe. Now, that seems to be quite an exciting storyline for that film, and I have to say, though, when I had seen it a few times, also I had seen it again, both films actually, just to be able to have the storylines fresh in my mind, especially the Quatermass Experiment. I was drawn into the story, drawn into the film from the very beginning, and it never had relented up until the very end, and it continued on, and Professor Quatermass saved the day, and was a pretty exciting scientific horror adventure throughout, and it kept me enthralled, and it kept me interested in the entire length of the film, and for the time it was pretty darn good film, though, for HammerFilms. I mean, starting into those genres. And just to give a little bit more background into the film here, principal photography began on the 12th of October in 1954 with a night shoot at Chessington Zoo, and continued from the 18th of October into December. The budget for the film was £42,000, low even by the standards of HammerFilms at the time. Special effects technician Les Bowie recalled, "We did Quatermass on a budget so low it wasn't even a real budget. I did it for wages and not as a proper effects man who gets allocated a certain budget for a movie." The work of makeup artist Phil Leakey, who would then work on many of the classic Hammer horror films, in transforming Richard Wordsworth Carroon into the mutating creature, was a key contribution to the effectiveness of the film itself. Val Guest, Anthony Hines, and Leakey all agreed that the makeup should make Carroon appear pitiful rather than ugly. Les Bowie provided the special effects. He had made his name perfecting an improved technique for matte painting called the delineating matte, and formed a company with Vic Mergutti, sorry if I butchered that specialized in matte effects. Bowie provided a number of matte paintings to enhance the scale of certain key shots in the film, including the crashed rocket, the Westminster Abbey set, and the shot of Quatermass walking away from the Abbey at the climax of the film. Now, without question, it can be said that the Quatermass Experiment and its sequel, released 2 years later, set the stage for the production of the official HammerFilms horror cycle, starting with The Curse of Frankenstein in 1957, immediately after the successful release of Quatermass II. And of course, as we know, as film enthusiasts and horror film enthusiasts, and even HammerFilms fans out there will know that they produce a series of successful classic Gothic horror films in the late 50s and into the early 60s. Many, many classics. Now I'll talk about Quatermass II. Quatermass II, titled Enemy from Space in the United States, is a 1957 black and white British science fiction horror film from HammerFilms Productions. It originally released in the UK as Quatermass II and was produced by Anthony Hines and directed once again by Val Guest, and stars once again American actor Brian Donlevy with co-stars John Longdon, Sidney James, Brian Forbes, Vera Day, and William Franklin. Also, for those HammerFilms fans, it also features as well an actor by the name of Michael Ripper, who has appeared in many subsequent Hammer horror films, and he has a pretty good co-starring role in this film as well, Quatermass II. The film's story concerns Quatermass's investigation of reports of hundreds of meteorites landing only in the Winnerden Flats area of the UK. His inquiries lead him to a huge industrial complex, strikingly similar to his own plans for a moon colony. This top-secret facility is in fact the center of a conspiracy involving the alien infiltration of the highest echelons of the British government. Quatermass and his allies must now do whatever is necessary to defeat the alien threat before it is too late. Alright, and for this adaptation, Nigel Neal himself was allowed to write the first draft of the screenplay, although subsequent drafts were worked on by director Val Guest himself. The plot is a condensed but largely faithful retelling of the original television serial, which is based on. The main difference between the two versions is at the climax. Excuse me. In the television version, excuse me, sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Jeez. In the television version, Quatermass blasts off in a rocket to confront the aliens in outer space, whereas in the film, the rocket is fired unmanned to destroy the aliens' asteroid base. Although Quatermass II was financially successful, its box office performance was eclipsed by the massive success of The Curse of Frankenstein, which was to be the first of their many Gothic horror films. And as a result of that, it would be 10 years before Hammer adapted the next Quatermass serial for the cinema with Quatermass in the Pit in 1967. Another great film. I'll be talking about that one as well down the road in a subsequent video in October. And the filming took place between the 28th of May and the 13th of July in 1956. The film's budget at £92,000 was much larger than that of the Quatermass Experiment. The bigger budget was achieved by the advanced sale of the distribution rights in the United States to United Artists. United Artists contributed some £64,000 towards the production of the film, as well as Brian Donlevy's $25,000 fee and his airfare to London from the US. And that brings me to an interesting point, though, concerning Brian Donlevy, an American actor, being tasked with the role of Bernard Quatermass, which is obviously a British character. During HammerFilms' early film productions during the 50s, up until 1957, it was a popular practice to enlist and contract American name actors so that it would increase the interest for the movie-going public in Britain, just so that the productions will have a much better chance of being popular and gaining box office success. And I mean, it is a bit unusual to have an American in what is a British role. But however, in spite of that, Brian Donlevy actually does a pretty good job as Quatermass. He brings the right type of energy and gravitas, and also the wherewithal in order to, as it were, bring the character to life for the films anyhow. Now, I'll be talking about the physical media here in the Blu-rays. Now, of course, the first one is the Quatermass Experiment. There we are. Just going to bring that up a little closer. I don't want to give it that glare. Okay, there we go. So that. And this is by Kino Lorber. And there's the for that. Right, and here is Blu-ray for Quatermass II. Make sure not to get that glare there. Okay, and this is by Shout Factory Scream Factory division. It's released by Shout Factory. Both Blu-rays I highly recommend. Please go and search them out and buy them. As I say, I'm in the videos previously and in this one, I advocate for purchasing physical media as much as possible. I know that sometimes that's not always possible in terms of availability for particular titles or whatnot, and unfortunately, I myself will say that I own digital copies of certain movies that I couldn't get my hands on either on DVD or Blu-ray, or especially Blu-ray. But I do recommend, again, I do recommend both these films because I do believe they do a spectacular job of combining elements of horror and science fiction. They do both have great storylines, and they're great films, and I do highly recommend them. And of course, these two films laid the groundwork for what will eventually become, as I mentioned, the classic Gothic horror films of HammerFilms Productions. All right. And with that said, that will end this video. So, as I say, please enjoy the Quatermass Experiment and Quatermass II. Highly recommended. So until the next time, in the next video, ladies and gentlemen, take care, and so long for now.